All right, looks like we're live. Hey, everybody, this is Steve Bishop from Programming Made Easy, and I've got a very special guest today. This is Jason Duke, who is a very long time friend of mine. We go back a long ways to some things that I'd rather probably forget. But Jason he runs a very wonderful company. His domain name is called the.domain.name. And he does some wonderful things in the SEO field, which you guys may be wondering, why am I watching something about SEO? What do I have to care about? I'm just a programmer. I just do code all day. Why would I care about SEO? So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to talk to someone who is very knowledgeable in the field and kind of tie in why we as developers, especially if you're doing web development, should be thinking about the way that you plan and develop your applications with a bit of an SEO slant in mind. What do you want to be doing while you're doing the development to kind of keep those concepts in mind while you're doing it, so you don't make any faux pas and you don't end up with a customer not happy with some of the code that you wrote because it makes it difficult for them to get proper SEO rankings. So Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Well, hello everyone, and Steve, thank you very much for inviting me onto your show. It's late here over in the UK, as I'm sure you can tell by my accent, Mr. and Mrs. Listener. I'm not local over in stateside, but I'm over here in the UK. Steve, it's really kind of you to invite me on, and I'm looking forward to the chats we're going to have around search. Do you want me to introduce myself to the audience, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Let them know who you are. Let me tell you a bit about myself, everyone. I'm Jason. I'm in my 40s. I wish I was younger. I've known Steve for many, many, many years. I'm not sure if we've quite hit 2 decades yet, but if we haven't, we're really close.
It's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah. And I've been working for about 20 odd years, maybe a little bit longer actually, just broken 2 decades working within the search industry. And when I mean search, I really mean organic search, SEO, manipulating third-party websites for fun and profit. I didn't realize all those years ago, when you're trying to reverse engineer the algorithms that were in play in the search engine of its day. Who remembers Alta Vista, and who remembers the guys before that? But I'd end up forging a career in it, but I did. And I have, and I currently work in providing data and services primarily within the SEO industry, and specifically domain name related data, obscene scale. It's what many people might call the so-called big data. But most of the years working within delivering rankings have been in the online gambling industry. Won't get into the morals and the arguments of whether that be good or bad, but it fed my kids and kept a roof over my head for many, many years. I'm very pleased to say that succeeded at the highest levels as well, ranking in every version of Google you can imagine for phrases like poker, casino, bingo, and so on and so forth. So that's me in a nutshell. Steve, I'm here to answer anything.
It's interesting because the gambling arena was something that was very, very popular, back before in America. It was not totally illegalized.
I know the law stateside well. It was exactly 10 years and a few days ago when there was a piece of legislation known as the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act, and it was tacked onto the very last session of a Friday night, the very last session before Congress broke up. And the piece of legislation it was tacked onto was called the Safe Ports Act. The Safe Ports Act was all about having the rights to check cargo as it comes into ports to make sure that it was safe and secure. But tacked onto the back of that was the UEGA, Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act. And what that said was, funny enough, because it changed the industry forever and a day, it said that any banks that move illegal gambling money around will be directly liable. But it never changed the definition of what was legal or illegal. Well, all the banks suddenly said, well, we're not taking that risk anymore because there's billions that move through this system in the gambling industry. And although we may think it's legal, there's no definitive answer from the Department of Justice. As it happens, a few years ago, poker. You may be aware of an old company called Party Poker. It was Poker Stars and people like that.
I headed up probably one of the most popular ones that was here in the United States.
2006, it became #1. Prior to that was Party Poker, and I headed up all their online marketing. for Party Poker. PokerStars were also a client as well, post 2006. Well, 2006 in UEGA, Party Poker, they just gone public on the London Stock Exchange, the biggest IPO ever seen in the UK. They were massive. Everyone was there. Everyone was playing on Party Poker. Well, they took a conservative view. They just gone public and they pulled out of the US market. And PokerStars, they were still private and they were preparing to IPO. And they said, you know what, we'll stay private. We'll carry on working in the US. And they carried on taking players in the US despite the legislative change and ended up owning the market. So it's an interesting space, and I apologize, it's not SEO specific, but
no, it's a fascinating. It's fascinating exploration back into some of the history of the internet, though, because one of the main uses that there was for the internet back then was poker. I mean, right down there, second step below porn was poker. You know, that was just such a big thing, and so the namespace, or that particular space of the internet was highly competitive. And right now, you guys have the opportunity to pick the brain of one of the guys that was the major driving force behind how to get those, those Google rankings. How did you get at the top of Yahoo? How did you get to Google? So I just want you guys, if you have a question for Jason here while we're having this discussion, feel free to just, there's a little chat window on the right-hand side that I will keep an eye on for your guys' questions. So if you have something for him, feel free to drop that in there. So Jason, my first question of general concern, I think, for most people would be, do you recall the first time that you actually touched a modern computer, something that was more PC or desktop that you could have in your home?
Do I remember? I'm getting older, but my memory's not quite gone yet. The defining moment for me was when I was 10 years old. And so I'm 44 now, 44 and a half. So over 3 decades ago. And a computer came out from a British guy, a guy called Sir Clive Sinclair. And it was a mass market home machine. And it was what we called over here the Sinclair ZX81. And I think stateside it was sold as a Timex something or other. So this would have been 82. And I remember speaking with my mum and dad saying, I'd really like this. And they did a deal. We did a deal. We said, Jason, if you can save up half, we'll put the other half of the money towards it. And it was a lot of money for back then. But I remember getting this computer. And it was connected to an old black and white TV via an RF outlet. And you had to tune it in manually in those old days. No things like remotes or clicking buttons. And it was a 1K ZX computer, so ZX processor. And it was revolutionary. It changed the world. And I was a wee boy of 10 years old. And there I was on a membrane keyboard knocking out some code. And that was probably...
Oof.
God, do you remember those old membrane boards?
Oh, man, those things were...
They were terrible. And I remember learning how to code a basic Sinclair basic. Many people would have learned on Commodores. I learned on Sinclairs. And some younger people will be on Amigas, maybe yourself, Steve, and others. You know, it was their first foray. But for me, it was 82. It was a Sinclair basic and it was a ZX81. And I remember learning and writing these basic programs. And then magazines came out and you type in a program that was printed in this magazine. And then it doesn't work. And you have to wait and save it on a cassette. You have to wait 2, 3, sometimes more months where they corrected the typos from the previous runs. And then you saved it again and you pulled it in. And it taught you how to be extremely efficient in code as well. Had 1K of memory in this machine back then. Can you imagine? 1K was the maximum that you could work with.
It's funny to think about the old machines that we used to use. I mean, the 386s, the 486s that I played around with at the very beginning. You know, if you got 16 megs of memory, you were on cloud 9 because it was just so much to work with. I'm talking 16 megs, people. Most PCs have more memory than I had for disk space. That's how small those things were at the time.
I remember those days well, and actually I remember upgrading to a 386 from a 286. I remember when a Pentium came out long after the 486s. You know, these were huge steps in advancement in processing power and what you could do with these things. I remember 20 or 21 years ago queuing up when Windows 95 launched. You know, this is a long time ago, and things have changed, which is a good thing. And although Windows was sort of my foray into the PC x86 architecture, it didn't end up being the route that I used commercially. I went a different route, and all due respect to you, Steve, I'm more of a Linux guy rather than a Windows guy.
Yeah, I completely understand. I know a lot of people are very comfortable with the Linux platform and the Unix platform. I think it offers a bit more of a direct connection to some of the computer hardware and the computer components than what Windows does. It's kind of a sugary layer is what Windows offers, more so than what Linux and Unix do.
Sure, but let's not forget that Windows itself as an operating system is a glorious beast. And many years ago, back when Red Hat was Red Hat, and that was, you know, one of the early versions of
yeah, before Ubuntu became the thing, right?
Exactly, you know. And let's be honest, Richard, my business partner, is a huge Ubuntu fan. I still prefer Debian. Because Ubuntu's just Debian who's trying to put on cool kids' clothes. That's all it is.
Well, you know, there's some politics involved in everything when it comes to your choice of computer framework to software development framework to everything. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody's comfortable with what they want. And I think that for the most part, you and I kind of agree that we get this question sometimes, at least I do, and I don't know about you, but, you know, people ask me, what should I learn? And I tried to tell them, you know, whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever makes sense to you is where you should go, because the technologies in all of these different arenas is so vast. And I think we're getting more and more towards a global, a globalism when it comes to how these technologies interact with each other. And you can take... Go ahead, Jason.
I was going to say I agree completely. Apologise for diving across you there. The output is what is important. How you get there does not matter. The browser is the new operating system for almost, at least in my industry. You know, I'm in SEO. It's all about bringing eyeballs through to my product or service, so that ultimately they get their credit card out and spend some money. Someone needs to spend some money somewhere. And remember the old saying, if you're not paying for it, then you're the product being sold via advertising. And so ultimately, if the web browser is the operating system, and I don't mean in a Chrome OS way, but the applications that you're building, it's invisible to the consumer, to the end user, whether you code on a back end in language X, Y, Z, or Z, as you may call it. Doesn't matter what the operating system is, it's still going to render ultimately HTML in the DOM.
Yeah, and John Sonmez, when I interviewed him just last week, he made basically the same point, that the browser is now becoming a virtual machine, and that's essentially all it is now. It is the box that is doing the actual the particular processes, and then you have some sort of server that is just basically sending information back to this client that's making the request. And I think it's a wonderful thing, because it's this, in programming terms, we call this decoupling. You decouple the business logic from the client. You decouple it so that you can have complete control of what that program is doing, and then you can have complete autonomy as to what type of platform is then going to be asking your application for different things. And that makes it so that if somebody's using a client that's based in Linux, or something that's based on a Google Android phone or an iPhone or just a web page, all these different pages can just ask your API for the information and then display it back to you. So it's a wonderful, wonderful age that we're in today.
And I agree. It sounds boring to agree, but ultimately what goes on at the back end, going back to the point that you were saying, is, for me, code in a style and in a manner and a language and a framework, if you wish to use a framework, that you feel comfortable in. I would always advocate understanding C as a language, because that's the father of so many other languages that you may end up ultimately coding with, whether it be Nix-based, whether it be Windows-based, C#, whether it be PHP, Ruby, Python, Perl, or a myriad other languages. A C core and an understanding of that is always going to be give you a good grounding in how to develop applications that work and deliver what you want. But ultimately, what gets spat out into the browser, how the consumer, your customers, use that and consume it, it doesn't matter. What does matter, though, is acquiring those consumers, because the days of build it and they will come are long gone. They did exist for a while. I remember building one of the very first sites was for a private investigation company. And I made a submission to Yahoo. It was just 2 guys running it back then, and sending off a fax. Who remembers faxes? You know, they're really old-fashioned things. Sending off a fax, and within 2 or 3 days, there I am listed in Yahoo, the directory, the handmade, personally verified by the founders directory of websites, and there it was. And then the phone started ringing. Private investigation work for the clients that are coming through. Those days are gone now. If you build it, they won't necessarily just come.
Yeah, so, that's definitely the newer direction I think that software has to realize it needs to go, is that it's not just about building a great product. It's about how do you get the word out about your product. And, you know, I honestly am not too terribly good at it. I just am not. I'm amazed that this channel has grown to be the size that it is. We're getting close to 20,000 viewers. And I'd like to think that it's because I make wonderful and great content. But the bottom line is, I know that a portion of the reason why I have so many viewers is because if you go look for access applications and software development, I'm one of the top, 1, 2, or 3 different results that you're going to get. And it just happens to be because I put in the correct keywords. I had the right descriptions to my videos. So let's
dive in, Steve, and talk about a few specifics here. Let's talk about ranking in Google, because the days of all the other search engines are gone. The future, it may change, but it's been stable, it's been solid, it's been Google for quite some time. And as it stands at the moment, it's going to be Google until the next king comes. And I don't see any princes on the horizon quite yet. So we want to rank in Google. The problem that we've got with Google is that Google doesn't necessarily want you to be there. So there is a moral argument, is do you build the best damn product that you can and allow Google and the world to effectively vote you up, and so eventually you'll get that traffic, and you'll wait and you'll until that delivers the rewards that you hope are coming, or to assist it? Do you effectively manipulate this third-party website, google.com, to push yourself higher than otherwise you would be naturally if you were to do no work at all? In the original days of when Google came out, the 2 guys, Larry Page, Sergey Brin, they wrote a paper while they were at Stanford, Anatomy of a Hypertext Engine, and effectively said one simple thing. It said a vote, a link on a website is equivalent to a citation or a vote for a site. And that wasn't that new. The interesting bit was, hey, if all of these people are all votes equal, if all of these people have voted for one person here, and he's got 1,000 people that supported him and said, this guy's really good, should that person carry the same weight as all these people over here who've only had one person vote for them? And the answer is no. They weighted the voting according to how popular that individual website or page URL actually was. And so that weighting, they tried and tested with academic papers and saw that a lot of the previous papers that would suddenly rise to the top were actually the higher quality papers that have been submitted in academia. And they applied this to the web, and it ended up clearly delivering a much higher quality of perceived results in the consumer. Consumer being you, me, and everybody else who was using web browsers and trying to find information in those days. These were the days, remember, that we had We had dedicated search engines for FTP sites, ftpsearch.no, fast.no. Alta Vista was still a baby, but was dominant, but was spammed to buggery by people like me, who were filling it with absolute rubbish. But Google got rid of a lot of that rubbish because prior to all of that, the factors that were incorporating the algorithms, the maths that went on behind the scenes to say what should be number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., were relatively simple. Throw some keywords on there, add up this, if you've got a bit more there in a head H1 tags or in a meta tags, or God forbid the keywords tags nowadays, is it would ramp that up. And so what clever but manipulative people did was to deliver the search engines everything that they wanted according to their algorithm. When their IP addresses from their spiders came up, that's what they fed them. But when a person turned up, it was completely different looking pages. It was stuff that they were tuned to sell the product they were trying to do. But things have moved on a lot from there. So, but let me say,
I remember those days where it seemed like you could find a Google ranking. You'd click on a link that you think was going to have the content you wanted, and then you just get redirected to another page that, well, how did I land here? I thought I was clicking on this link.
Yeah, and those days do occur, but they're very rare now. And the reason it's very rare,
I think the Google algorithm has definitely changed. I'm not going to say it's gotten better. Sure. I think the results to some extent have probably improved, but there's the ability to get your site to become one of those top sites may not quite be as simple as it may have been in the past. So,
well, let's get a few things, real basic things taken care of here. If you wish to rank well in Google nowadays, there are 2 or 3 basics you have to get done. They're prerequisites before you even think about SEO. An amazing experience, the application that you build, the product, it needs to be of at least a quality that is equal to those that are currently ranking. So an amazing experience is a prerequisite before we can even get the opportunity to rank. If you have a crap site, if you have a crap product, it is not going to rank. It's that simple. So when you build your product, the service, the website, whether you're selling, I don't know, vaping devices, microphones, or it's a software as a service application, I don't know. Whatever it is, it needs to be best of breed. If it isn't, doesn't matter pretty much what else you do. It won't have the opportunity to rank.
You have to build a really good quality product to compete with what's already there in the marketplace before you can even consider some of the SEO type of things.
Exactly. And once that barrier to entry has been overcome, which isn't easy, but it's a minimum standard, not a maximum standard, you then have a website and a user experience journey that has an opportunity to rank. But where you now need 2 further things. You need the content, and content you was talking about, you're surprised about why you've built a viewership of 20 or 1,000 people. Well, Steve, I think you answered it yourself. You're one of those top guys. Google rewards that. You're delivering great content. Your content that you're building is in a video format. It doesn't have to be. But for YouTube, which is a Google-owned property when all's said and done, video is king. It's also the current war they're having with Facebook and others, but mostly Facebook, that video is so dominant, whether it be via phones, whether it be via the desktop, and just bandwidth increasing generally across the board. It's an immersive experience and worthwhile. But content can be words, it can be pictures, it can be the user experience of using your site. But build those minimum standards. The product, the service, the website that you're building must be great. Then the content must also be incorporated within that site. You at the moment, Steve, are building an amazing YouTube channel. You type in programmingmadeeasy.com, it sends me to YouTube. That site, that domain name, is never going to rank in Google because you're redirecting it. Is that the right long-term play for you? I don't know. That's a business decision that you need to make.
Yeah, and that's something actually, it's interesting that you talk about that. The main reason why I did that was because it was really just, the domain is available. I don't have a site ready to go for it that, I feel comfortable with. So I'm just going to, for the meantime, point it to my YouTube channel, and at least that way I can get people to know and recognize the name. I'm building a brand. That's what I'm doing.
Good man. Good man.
And then from once I have my brand in the position that I want it to be, and I have a page that I think is going to be matching the quality that Jason was talking about, then I'm going to be comfortable with making the switch to having it being a, an individual page. But I'm still obviously going to be putting everything that's going to be YouTube driven, so that I'm just basically updating my web page with my YouTube.
Let me be clear, there is nothing wrong with building your brand on a third-party website. YouTube isn't going to disappear. It's not going to pull the rug from your feet. Or, I think it's highly unlikely that's going to happen. There's no guarantees. The only upside of running your own domain name is you are the master of your domain, quite literally. You don't have to concern yourself as to whether YouTube were to pull that from you. If you were to build it on Facebook, if you were to build it on Wistia, or whoever the video platform may be, there is always that chance. I think it's unlikely it could happen, but theoretically it could. At the moment, you are tied to YouTube. But I think it is unlikely that YouTube are going to pull that ability for you to continue building that audience.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, this kind of brings me to one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Do you have any sort of general tips? I know you probably can't be too specific here, but do you have any, making some adjustments there, do you have any sort of recommendations or general tips that you could give somebody who is looking to get a domain name? Is there something that you might give someone a general opinion about?
Now, Steve, I don't know if, I hope nobody saw what just happened, but I realised I hadn't plugged my laptop in and the battery was dying on me, so I had to hunt around for the cable and quickly plug it in. So whatever you just said, I never heard a word of it, and I do apologise to both you and the audience. This is live. It's human nature. I made a mistake.
That's okay, not a problem. I was just asking, is there a general tip that you might give someone? I know you can't really get into too many specifics because, frankly, specifics is what you get paid to do. So,
well, screw it, Steve. I'll get into specifics. I've known you for 20 bloody years. I'm going to tell you what it takes. But what's the question? A domain name specific?
Yeah, well, what would you tell somebody they should be thinking about when they're trying to pick a domain?
Here's the thing. Let me answer that. I just spoke about what it takes to rank on Google. We said amazing user experience. It needs to be number one, not two, not three. It's a prerequisite. If you haven't got that, everything else, you're just not going to get there. Number two, you need the content, video, words, audio, whatever it may well be. You need the content that goes in it. Again, that goes with the user experience of bringing the leads in. They don't know about your product or service. They need to understand about it. You need to be a hub of authority in the area that you are, and that's what you're building with Programming Made Easy. But you know what delivers the rankings? It's links. It's those votes, the citations, if we talk about academia. Now, links matter. It's what the Google, the PageRank algorithm, the anatomy of the hypertext engine paper was all about. Links, links, links. They're the things that deliver the rankings. Once you've got those prerequisites of great content and amazing user experience and a great product in place. So, if you want a domain name, and you want to rank with domain names, this is what our product and our service does. I'm not going to give it a big plug, but I am going to explain a couple of very basic things. There are a few 100 million domain names out there that are live at any one time. Many, many of them have extra host names associated with it, subdomains, etc. Many of those are just there for routing reasons. So machine1.domain.2.3.com. Something like that, networking reasons. Ignore all of those. But any of those domain names that were out there and had websites on had the opportunity for gaining links. Now, if you can imagine, Google likes links. If you wanted a domain name that is available to be registered, do you want the perfect domain name, programmingmadeeasy.com? Or do you want a subpar but good enough domain name that someone used to have, and for whatever the reason, it gained links and they let it expire, but the links don't disappear. So if there was programmingmadeeq.com, would that work for you? Probably. If it had 20,000 links that are all topically relevant and delivered you, saved you 10 years of link building efforts and work, it gives you a massive head start in the Google rankings. It's not as good as Programming Made Easy, but EQ, you can work with that. It's not what you want, but it'll put more bucks in your pocket a hell of a lot sooner.
It's not about me. It's about trying to get the people that are going to be able to identify or
Exactly.
it's about the links back to that page. And is
Links.
Google already linking?
Not every link
page,
is made equal. Let me make that clear. There are links you can get out there and they're bad. So don't go out trying to get lots of links. I'll go on a forum, I'll stick a link here and I'll talk about a blog post and I'll pull a link there. And I'll go and write some software that just submit it to all these different sites and I get 50,000 links overnight. Quantity is not always the right way to go. Not everything in quantity has the quality that you're looking for. However, if there are links that are pointing to a domain name and that domain name's available, and you know about that domain name, you know it's available now, it has lots of links. That's what my product, the domain name, the.domain.name, does. What we have, and I'm going to give you a very brief overview, and why I call it sort of big data. I don't know where does it go from medium to big? I don't know the answer to that when we're talking about data, but we have over, I don't think we've hit 700 million domains yet, but I know we're over 650. So 650 million domains, and every backlink to every one of those domains searchable in real time. So if you want a domain that's got backlinks about programming, you type programming in our box and it will come up and tell you about the 10,000 or whatever domains there are that are available to be registered that have the word programming in the backlinks. And it's those backlinks that help deliver that topical relevancy from an algorithmic point of view when it comes to Google.
So along with that, would it be beneficial? Your backlinks are basically these links that are going to be coming from other sources. Exactly. So they're not internally within our own application. We can't just make a brand new page on our own domain.
You can. But you know what? If I were to ask you, Steve, no. If I ask Mrs. B to say, Mrs. B, tell me about Mr. B, and she'd say nothing but amazing things because it will be a nepotistic recommendation. She loves you. But if I were to ask some of your colleagues, there'd still be some nepotism there, but it'd be slightly more honest. If I speak about the people that you pop down to Walmart, you do some shopping, and I speak to the cashier, what does she think of you? That's going to be more honest. Now, when we talk about the web as a whole, other sites linking in from a common sense point of view mean more from an algorithmic point of view than you talking about and linking about yourself. And so external sites linking to you is a great thing when done well, because it can be done badly.
So is there anything you can think of? I'm just thinking from a developer standpoint, when we're going through and we're creating a page, is there something that we could focus on as we're building page to page to kind of make it? Is it just
let's talk about specifics, and let's talk about some advancements in the technology within the last, let's say 10 years, but probably less. Google Maps was one of the first mass market uses of the AJAX style asynchronous calls in JavaScript from web page to web page. It's common now. Having API fed in via a web worker, and you'll have your JavaScript functions on the page, whether it be jQuery, whatever library, or self-coded, receiving that data, refreshing the page, and an application all occurring within that one URL that would appear within the screen is common and standard nowadays. That's not revolutionary anymore. It was years ago. However, search engines pull the data, will render. Google now does render the JS, but it doesn't fully integrate with the application itself. So if all your content is hidden behind the actual user developing and using the application fully, then the search engines can't get to see it. And if they can't get to see the words on the page, the words on the page give you the opportunity to rank. And so if you are using AJAX style method of JavaScript coding within the ultimate DOM that gets rendered, think about subtle things such as push state. Push state enables with an event occurring within the JS of the page, that it will change URL. And so that unique URL can then reference back to a JS function firing. And I apologize if I get slightly wrong. I'm really not a coder anymore. I hack away at code rather than do any real stuff. If you ask my business partner, I'm a dangerous man when you leave me near a keyboard that's connected to a terminal. I like playing, but I break more than I fix, let's be frank. And so I may have got some terminology wrong, but the basic principles are: make your content accessible by the simplest of browsers. Now, back in the day, that would have been something like links. So imagine a basic HTML, not HTML5, just a standard HTML1 style browser that only see text. What does it see? Have a look at how it would interact with your web-based application that you built. If there isn't a way for it to find its way through there, if it needs JavaScript, that may be the base standard that a search engine will see for the content and the words that you put on that page. I will say, please don't stuff keywords in meta tags, keyword tags, all on the page. Just write in a common sense way as you'd write for any individual. But if it can't see those things, you don't have the opportunity to rank for those phrases that you write and talk about, which is why for YouTube, as an example, annotations are a glorious thing. If you don't do them yourself, your YouTube are doing for you automatically. If you do get the time, I'd suggest going through manually and giving them those closed captions and the annotations you get within there. It assists Google in understanding all of these phrases and my funny accent of what we're talking about, and gives you the opportunity for your video or your page, whatever it may well be, to rank for some of the phrases that we're naturally talking about. But again, an opportunity for rank. In the competitive places, we will probably talk about lots and lots and lots of things and naturally cover them. But when you're working in those mega competitive mortgages, finance, car loans, or any other industry like that, there's going to be ruled not by the content, because that minimum standard is met by all and the bar is very, very high, but by the quality and collective quantity of the links that go into those individual URLs from external sites as well as the internal ones. Now, I've been going on for a while. I've got more to say, but I'm going to pass the microphone back to you. I don't want to hog it all, Steve.
Well, I think it's interesting because the technology is going more towards these single page applications, or SPAs as they're commonly called, where you get a JavaScript framework like Angular or React, and they are a virtual machine. They're just a single page virtual machine that's loaded once, and then everything is Ajaxy calling back to your API. And this kind of ties into what we're talking about here, because you're putting into essentially all of that content from that Ajaxy JavaScript stuff into something that not necessarily will be picked up by the Google search engine. So you have to think carefully about how your content looks. If you don't have one of those frameworks in there, how will your page react?
Exactly.
How will it look? How will the content look if that JavaScript stuff is turned off? And there's a lot of devices too that don't have JavaScript turned on that may not look quite as good. So it's just something to be thinking about when you're building.
Well, let me add something else. Even if JavaScript is turned on, but you don't interact with the application, is it need interactions? You need to click buttons, click around, play a game, undertake actions within the system to get to that point where the rewards of the content are going to be shown to you. If that's needed, Googlebot, Google Spider won't see that content. And it's that content and the phrases and words and things that you talk about and occur within there give you that opportunity to rank. So you need to think in a way. I still believe build for the users and adapt for search engines. Don't build for the search engines and hope the users will accept it. A great application is a prerequisite, not the end goal. And so that comes first. But some tweaks may assist in enabling the search engines give you the best opportunity that you have available to you.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial to understand that if you are thinking about going with a single page application type of thing, we're not saying don't do it. SPAs are a wonderful thing, because I love the fact that you can essentially build an entire application that gets loaded once and that's it. And the browser, and the user experience is wonderful when you could do that. And that's essentially what Jason's talking about, is build that user experience first. Make sure that it's as good as it can possibly be. And then start to think about, okay, how can I build some content outside of what I've built in this spa application so that the search engines will pick it up, as well as my users can use my page if they don't have these types of JavaScripts enabled on their devices.
Exactly. And even if they do have the JavaScript enabled, but they don't interact with you, because if they don't interact with the application, which matches the functions ultimately be called, the various JS content to be loaded, whether it be via API or otherwise, they're not going to see it. And so that's how you need to think. Second to that, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had a second point.
No, please. It's your show.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think would be the biggest mistake that people do with their web pages?
At the moment, that's probably it. Not making it available to be found well by Google. You could have the best damn application ever, but that's good because that's what should come first. But if they stop there and the application isn't viewable by Googlebot in its entirety, and the content isn't able to be liberated into the SERPs, the search engine results page, as those 10 blue links that you get, you don't have the opportunity for it to be shown and therefore someone to click it. So if you have an application that does that and your content is contained within there, then okay, that's fine. But as well as that, free that content so it can be seen in a simple format by Googlebot, a web browser, without interaction. That doesn't mean no JS. You can have on load events and so on and so forth, but in a very basic format with a base browser, modern day style base browser, make that content available to be consumed in one way or another.
Are there any technologies you would say that we should probably try to avoid? And this is going to be kind of I'm sure it's a loaded question, because I'm sure somebody's going to go, that Jason Duke, he said something bad about me. So
well, let me say this. I have a personal preference for the Nix style environment. You know, my roots were in Solaris, were in Linux in the early days of very early. I think my first Red Hat distribution was 2 point something. I can't remember what. So we're going back to the early 90s at the latest. It may have been in the late 80s, I'm not sure. So I have an affinity to that style of operating system, and the program language naturally went hand in hand. When I first got to know you, Steve, I was working with Perl almost exclusively.
I remember those days.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone coming to Perl and actually using it day to day in their working environment if they were starting out nowadays. It just wouldn't happen. It will be a different language. It will be a different application layer. It might be an MVC style framework, but that's even old school nowadays. It doesn't matter what you code. It doesn't matter what framework you use. It doesn't matter what the language is, because as we said before, the browser is the device. What you do on the back end, how you bring that together in the browser, who cares? If someone's doing its browsing on a Windows phone, the 7 or 8 people that actually own one, if someone's looking on iOS, if someone's looking on Android, if someone's looking on an Ubuntu laptop or a Windows machine, they're using Chrome, Firefox, Safari, it doesn't matter. It all renders pretty well. Even Edge is an amazing browser nowadays. They're all pretty damn good, and they'll render and deliver a similar enough user experience across all of these devices. The browser is the new operating system. You should just code in whatever style and whatever manner you prefer. My preferences are going to differ to yours, Steve. It doesn't mean that you're right, and it doesn't mean that I'm wrong, or vice versa.
So Flash is on the table?
Look, if you're still using Flash, you're a bit of a twat, right? Let's not go those routes, okay? Before we even talk about Apple,
no Flash,
no Flash, okay? I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say twat. I'm an Englishman after all. I don't know. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Don't use Flash, but no one would use Flash.
The opposite of that would be, are there any technologies maybe that are not quite as popular yet that are really exciting to you?
It doesn't matter, because Steve, it doesn't matter. The browser is the OS now. If we're talking, look, here's my tips and my advice. Build an amazing website. Don't care what back-end languages we use. Is it render in all of the popular browsers? And we can name them really quickly. Chrome, Safari. That's about it.
Uh,
You can include Firefox, but they've got that much now compared to Chrome and
yeah,
Safari.
their market share has gone down quite
And
considerably.
Safari is
Chrome,
tiny.
I think, is it's amazing how many people now use Chrome. I remember talking to people about, they still were using Internet Explorer, and I kept loading up Chrome for them, and they liked the experience so much more. And it was kind of, I remember when it first came out, people were like, oh,
All,
I don't even
Steve,
know what this is.
Steve, all I'm going to say to you is even Edge, Chrome, Safari all come from Conqueror, which is
Ah,
a
yeah.
Linux-based operating system. Well, not an operating system, but a windowing tool and KDE and the web browser around there. That's all I'm going to say to you. It wasn't. It wasn't the IE engine that ended up ruling the world. Okay, I miss Internet Explorer. I wish that Internet Explorer of old was still here because it could be abused in so many wonderful ways. But the truth is, WebKit is the new king, and that's the environment that we live in now. So as long as it renders in a WebKit-based browser, yes, Firefox, you can throw it in. It's a great product, but next to no one uses it now, other than Richard, my business partner, the guy that uses Ubuntu. That's really Debian, with some cool kids' clothes on. It's if it renders in WebKit, you're going to be okay. Let's not overcomplicate things. What you use behind the scenes to deliver that content to the WebKit-based browser is your personal choice. You do it in the way that you feel. Basic good standards say try and use unique URLs, try and deliver a content so it has URL, and it's not just behind the scenes transactions going on with no push state and history and so on and so forth. If you can reduce query string or even anchor tags, so I mean off the hash that will get the shebang, as we used to call it in those years gone by, of the URL, named anchor. Try and reduce that, so don't push everything that way. But they're basic things that most of your viewers are going to know. Make the content available that gives you an opportunity to rank. And then when you get an opportunity and it's on a high quality website to be part of the conversation, be part of the conversation where it's topically relevant and join the conversation and talk about yourself, talk about your product, and where appropriate, place a link. If you're adding to that conversation, whether we're talking Reddit, whether we're talking a forum, whether we're talking Facebook, whether we're talking Twitter, whether we're talking here on a video, and the annotation is going to turn the.domain.name into a clickable link, I'll take that. Google will love it. I'll take them, and every time they'll add on, because this is a high quality destination in its own right. But collectively, they will help head up, because your competition are doing it. The less you do on the link building side, the further ahead they're going to get. Because this isn't a zero-sum game. It's not a one-lap race. You think it's one-lap race, you're on ahead, woohoo! Stand and wait at the end of 400 meters. You may wait a while there before anyone catches up. Eventually, they'll overtake you.
I think that's some pretty solid advice. I think we're in a pretty good consensus here that it's really about the product that you deliver. It's about getting some backlinks back to your page. It's about proper, having good content on there, aside from the wonderful, if you're building like a spa application, having your content look great and be easily interactive if the user doesn't have some of the top technology, because you do have to think about a lot of people are going to have some of the older browsers. There's still some people out there with IE8, and I see that it
Yeah, but
causes
with
a lot of breakage.
Steve,
Yeah.
in the big picture, the people who are using Internet Explorer 8 are insignificant. If you're working and delivering a site that works on WebKit, you're delivering for over 95% of the population of the world as a whole there. If you design for the edge cases, you will be forever consigned to worrying about browsers like Edge, which even then is actually really, really good, but tiny, insignificant market share. And it's still a WebKit browser. I would ignore Internet Explorer 8 because it's diminishing returns. The hours that you can invest.
Oh yeah. I don't mean for designing. I mean your initial product that you should be designing should be the best experience that you can give it on the best top of the lines that everybody has. I think what I'm really trying to drive at here is that we were talking earlier about making sure that what the search engine sees is content that is still usable, And if you didn't have all those wonderful frameworks like Angular or React or something, and going back and seeing what the experience looks like in IE8 might give you an idea of what that looks like. But yeah, you definitely don't want to be programming for those guys, because that's probably somebody who's 85 years old and hates technology, just wants to go see some pictures that their grandson posted. They're probably not going to still be caring about what kind of search engine ranking that they got. They're probably more curious about
agreed. If only those grandkids would come round and see their grandfather more often. They should get off their bums, get in their car, drive round, go and see your grandfather and your grandmother. Right? Mine are gone. Yours might be soon. Go and see them now.
Yeah.
Phone your mother.
Oh man, it's sad to think. I'm quite a bit away from my family, and I think about it all the time. I try to give them phone calls as often as they can to try to remind myself of what it was like to have a family.
Steve, are you a good son? When was the last time you phoned your mother?
Oh boy, I am not a good son. I am not a good son.
When we get, look, Steve, I've known you long enough to tell you this. When you get off this show, you get off the here, you cancel, you pick up your phone and say, "Hi, Mum, how are you?" Will you do that for me?
Come and visit. She did come and visit just a few months ago, so we
had
a few months. Yes.
Steve, get on the phone once this show.
She visited me.
Good. That's good. Get on the phone if it's been months. That's disgusting. I saw my mum yesterday.
Well, you British people, you love your mums so much that it makes us Americans seem, inadequate.
No. I think. Joking aside, I've known you a long time, and we love our family. Both of us do, And this is just us ribbing each other. Look, let me get back to the SEO stuff.
Okay.
Once you've got those prerequisites right, and that means you've got to roll up your shirt sleeves, and you're going to get sweaty brows, and you're going to have to bash the keyboard. You've got to do some work. It's not quick, it's not nice, it's not easy, but that's the difference between you and your competition, because you are going to succeed. You're going to put the hours in. You're going to wipe that sweat off your brow. You're going to bash that keyboard and deliver the opportunity for success. But then, and this is important, and it's really, really important, links are what deliver the rankings. I'm not and can't in this show go into the details of what is a good link or a bad link, talk about Penguin, the Hilltop paper by Krishna Bharat, and many, many, many other things. But if you interact with the web at large, interact in the name of your organization, and allow your organization that you're representing to have a voice online, and where appropriate, place a link. But place it far, place it wide, and find the quality that you want to consume with. Don't go to the dregs of society unless your target market are in the dregs of society. But if you have a high-class product, interact in the places the high-class people hang out. If you have a low-class product, there's nothing wrong with that. I worked in a poker game for many years, and that was as low-class as you can get. But it was also big bloody money. Go and interact with them. Consume. Chat. Talk. And link. Because it's the links that deliver the rankings themselves, if you've got the prerequisites already there.
Well, I really appreciate that you have given this advice, and I first of all, thanks for even coming on the show. It's interesting to kind of have a blast from the past come on here. And before we go, I just wanted to ask one kind of pull back away from the SEO conversation a bit and talk more in general terms of just technology in general. I think a lot of my viewers are arena that they might want to be going into as far as development wise, and just from your outsider perspective, somebody who has really not much to do with the development side of things. Do you think that web applications, desktop applications, or phone applications are going to be the dominant software market in the future?
Let me answer that in a roundabout way, if I can. If you were starting today and you needed to code in one language that would deliver as far as we can look ahead into the future, which is not possible forever, but as far as we can, I'd say learn JavaScript. I'd learn naked JavaScript. Forget the frameworks. You learn the foundations before you use the tools that make it more efficient. Why? Because it will deliver you the applications. It will deliver you the web applications. It will deliver you the iOS applications, deliver you the Android applications. Google is moving, it published this publicly a couple of days ago, that they are moving from a desktop first database. So they presume most people search on desktop, and the results are specifically focused for the desktop style environment, whether it be a PC, laptop, etc. But they're moving now to a mobile first database. So they're presuming the majority of the query is going to come from a mobile device. There was a stat that Google gave out a couple of years ago, and it was something like, it was a quarterly earnings call. And one of the stats, it was tucked away on this call, stat that for 40% of searches that are undertaken within Google, is a mobile application is embedded within the SERPs, the search engine results page. That said to me, and it was very interesting, it said to me that that's 60% that don't, yet they want to show something that's relevant in application style. So if I was giving advice as to what the best way to go is code for mobile first, code applications that assist, and it could just be a simple web view style or an adaptation of existing web-based thing, whatever that thing may be, the application, the device, the service, the product, but code that into an app as well. Cross-compile it so it's available on the iOS store as well as the Android store. There are others, but they're tiny. If you've got iOS and you've got Android, who cares about everything else? If you've got everything else, you still want iOS and you want Android. The days of J2ME applications and little Nokia devices just aren't there anymore. We are talking about a two-horse race at the moment. BlackBerry's gone. We know that, not even building phones anymore. But build for the mobile first. Decisions are made, in my opinion, for higher value items on desktop, but the research is undertaken on mobile. And I say that from the benefit of seeing obscene amount, terabytes worth of log file data and transactions that go through that. But that is the environment we're in now. Research is done on a mobile device. Decisions are consumed and enacted on a desktop. But that's only because transactions on a mobile device are rarely done well. Where it's, you look at Amazon, you look at eBay, it's very simple. Everyone's got one of those two accounts, click through a couple of things, bang, they bill your card and the thing comes through the post. You don't, but trying to type on those little things is really awkward, which is why still most of those transactions aren't fully enabled on a mobile yet. So decisions made on a mobile, complete on desktop. If you can bridge that gap so that it's a relatively simple process on a mobile device to get that payment info in. PayPal works, people. I don't like PayPal. I don't use PayPal for our customers that come in. But you know what? The transaction on mobile is really simple, as is Amazon payments. If you're in a Western world, everyone's got a PayPal and an Amazon account already, and the payments are embedded without you having to log in. You just click a couple of times on your phone, and that's it. The money's transferred and it works. If you can do that, you've taken a huge barrier out, and the decision to purchase can be made at the research stages rather than as it is at the moment, the many site research and complete on desktop.
I think you're hitting on something really very substantial here. You're really talking about how you have to think about what type of interaction you're creating for the user. If it's going to be something that is okay on a mobile device, that it's not a transaction type of process like you're talking about where big decisions are being made, then it's okay to have something on web because it's a research type of thing. You're pulling out your phone to look up the latest information on the statistics in Zimbabwe on the number of zebras or something like that. You're going to be pulling out your cell phone to do that kind of thing. You're not going to be going to your desktop and pulling up the browser, doing the Google search. You have this handy device right here in your pocket that does that. But when it comes to banking transactions and looking at my statements to see what was the last thing, I can do that now on my cell phone pretty substantially well because banks have bridged that gap. But there was a time, if you think about it, just maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where you didn't really want to do that over your phone. You wanted to do it on your desktop because you could make better decisions. You had better information at your fingertips, at your disposal. You could see the full statement and the printout and all the transactions that you've done and make a better decision based upon all that information. And somehow the banking industry has been able to bridge that gap. And if you can bridge that gap, using mobile,
Exactly.
then do it. Do it.
Exactly. Let me throw in one area that hasn't yet risen to the challenge, but I believe is on a cusp of about to. Huge size financial transactions, the travel market,
Mm.
vacations, whether you're staying in country or going abroad, wherever it may well be. The research he's doing, sitting down in front of the TV in the evening with your wife, your girlfriend, your partner, your kids, you're browsing for all these amazing destinations. But do you complete that multiple £1,000s or dollars purchase in a mobile? Rarely. But when someone moves and takes it to Agnes, we found it, look, and you show the phone around, we found it's the perfect place, and look at the price, we've already looked everywhere else and they're lower, let's buy it now. The decision has been made. Now it's hard to physically complete that by clicking the button on the phone. They've saved it. They might send themselves an email and they go and open it up in Gmail or Hotmail, still via a web browser, and then they'll complete it with the proper keyboard in front of them because they've got to stick in the passport information, the credit card, and so on and so forth. If someone can bridge that gap and make it seamless, we're not talking 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 bucks here per transaction. We're talking thousands. And it hasn't yet been done well. Expedia don't do it. No one has quite got there yet.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that my wife and I, we recently went on a trip and we used Orbit's webpage in order to do it. And it was very much like that. We would maybe pull up the phone in order to maybe look at some different destinations and such. And then when we had kind of a general idea, we'd look it up more or less to be more in-depth looking at it. We would go to our computers, we'd pull up our laptops, we'd look at it that way before we actually committed to the transaction. So you're right, Orbitz hasn't bridged that gap yet. Expedia probably hasn't bridged that gap yet. I don't think that anybody really has a solid interface that you can look at just on your phone to make that transaction. But you would think a company that does these giant transactions like this, that would be a really driving motivation for them.
What? No.
To be able to do that.
I'll explain why it's not a driving motivation for them. First off, Orbitz and Expedia is the same company now.
So, that's true.
Okay.
Good point.
Secondly, the Orbitz director of online marketing became the Expedia director of marketing. He's now looking after both of them, and he's an old British pal. He's moved over stateside. They don't need to bridge the gap because they're the behemoths in the room. They own the market already. They don't have anything to lose. They're not going to gain anything. But the new young startup, the smaller operator that does want to gain some more of the market share of the travel business, this is multi-billions upon billions of dollars probably every week. The truth is, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. It's huge. If someone did enable that, and the quality and experience and the pricing, because it's a price-sensitive marketplace, enabled that the decisions can be made and enacted on that mobile device, well, that's a company that I think that you'd see would worry the Expedia and Orbitz when they see that hockey stick growth, the marketing, minimal marketing they need to put in to gain significant market share.
Well, that's I definitely agree with you there. I think that having a competition like that might spur someone like Expedia or Orbitz to reconsider their position on something like that.
We'll wait and see. I'm sure there's some amazing programmers working in various travel businesses who are watching this show, whether live or after it goes out. And I'm sure that some of them will go, I've been telling my boss that and it just hasn't happened. Well, you know what? Push a little bit harder to your boss. You may be the difference between your company becoming the next Expedia or the local travel agents in your local mail. There is a difference in this
either. It's not just in the travel agency. You're bringing up them as a good example, but I'm also thinking there's applications now. My wife has one on her phone, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's one where you can go on and post up pictures of something that you want to sell, and somebody can buy it. So like a Craigslist, right? But the Craigslist that's on your phone as an app, so it's way more convenient, and this application probably hasn't been around for much longer than, I don't know, maybe less than a year. But it just took off, and now it's become one of the main things that people
Let,
use.
let's take Craigslist as an example. Craigslist, there's 1,000 categories, and there's more than 1,000, but we'll call 1,000. Every single one of them has an RSS feed. Build your own. This isn't rocket science, guys. If you can, you don't need to be the behemoth of a corporation to gain the market share now. The data's available. You just need to suck it in, do your work with it, and make the experience better than the alternative. And if the alternative, the bar set at Craigslist, where it's those little links, and that's all it is, it's basic text on a page, but the experience on mobile is not much better. But the data's available and freely available. Mash it up, make your own, make it easy. This can happen, and if it isn't you, it will be someone else. The technological hurdles are not huge, so use the ability that you have as a seasoned programmer, or even if you're not a seasoned programmer, pulling a few RSS feeds into something that can be managed in a mobile device isn't that hard in any language. It's structured data. Be the one that makes a change.
That's good advice. And I want to say thank you again, Jason. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we've been, gosh, like you said, we've been friends for almost 2 decades now, and we could probably go on. That's probably more interesting than any of the stuff that we've talked about for the last hour. So my viewers would probably love it if I got into some of the CD escapades that we did, and some of the stuff that we probably definitely really don't want to talk about, because
we won't talk about it.
No, we don't want to do that.
But Steve, let me say, it's been a pleasure and an honor spending time with you today, and an even bigger pleasure and honor to be spending time with your audience. So thank you to you, and thank you to everyone that tuned in. Thank you. I'd love to do it again. You know where I am. If you ever think you'd like me on, I'd love to. And if not, we'll still chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think that I love doing these videos, and I would love to have some recurring guests, because I think people get used to personalities and comfortable with it, and I can't deny that there's a certain thing that I'd like to see, and that is more UK subscribers. I'd like to see that part of the market come my way.
Brits, come here, come see Steve. Here's what I want though. If you want me back on, your audience need to send some questions in. I'll answer them. I've got 20 years.
Yeah. What is this? I got no questions from anybody. I don't understand.
If they don't care about marketing, that's fine. I get it. If they want to be on page, who wants to be on bloody page 2? If you want to be on page 2 of Google, it's where people go to die and businesses go to die. If that's where you want to be, that's fine. I'm in the wrong place. I can't spend time with people that care about making money. But if that's where your audience want to be, that's no problem. Less competition for me and my clients. However, if they want to get to page 1, and really the top of page 1, I'll happily answer almost any question. And I say almost any, there's going to be some things just not going to give up. But when it comes to ranking in Google, that is the ultimate traffic source of converting purchasers of products, of services. And remember that old saying, what I said before, if you're not selling something or you're not buying something when you're on a website, then you are the product. So there's multiple ways you can monetize an application. You're looking here on YouTube, and if you haven't got ad block, it's going to be millions of ads coming up on pre-rolls and every other shape and form. You're the product. You're being sold to the advertisers. If, however, you go on random website, Expedia, you're buying a product, and that product it is the air flight, etc. The technical challenges you can solve, they are going to be hard. They're going to be sweaty. They're going to time bashing the keyboard. You need to put the hours in. But to deliver the consumers, you need to rank in Google. There's other ways you can get minimal traffic. It'll probably be enough to sustain a business. But to go to that nth level, Google needs to become your bitch. And when she's your bitch, she rewards you very, very, very well indeed. She may decide to throw you out of bed occasionally, and she'll get someone else that's a new favourite. But you know what? When you're there, there's no feeling like it in the world.
Yeah, and if you're building software, and you're thinking about marketing your application, there's no better way than to get yourself at #1 on Google, because you know that that's going to generate a lot of views to your page, and that's going to make a lot of cash a lot of money that you're going to be able to do. And then maybe, you know, you don't even have to be up there forever, right? If you get up there and
Hi,
you build it up,
Steve.
you know.
Steve, as a British comedian, a guy called Spike Milligan, he died quite a many years ago, and he had a saying: "Money may not buy you happiness, but it sure gets you a better class of misery." And for me,
I think we
that's
can
what
all
ranking in Google's all about.
Well, I know I keep saying this, but Jason, thank you so much for coming on and giving us your wisdom. It's much appreciated. And I'm sure that the next time I bring you on, I'll probably have some more questions for you from the audience, because your input is definitely valuable. And I'd like to see us bridge this gap a little bit more between thinking about how we're developing an application and how we want it to be presented online. I think that's something that needs to be driven a bit more in our industry.
Well, Steve, it's been an honor. Thank you for your time, and thank you all the viewers as well. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you guys next time.